Davenport, Iowa lies on the banks of the mighty Mississippi. It is in the heart of the heartland, an agricultural hub where industry supports those working the richest soils in the world. I'm going to visit with 3 farmers in Scott County who are all on the forefront of modern agricultural practices to learn about how farmers are advancing their operations to increase revenue and improve environmental outcomes. Out here in the heartland, where agriculture drives rural economy, we are on the path to a future that not only produces food, but also renewable energy, ecological services, and improved wildlife habitats. I'm on a journey to tell the stories of Horizon 2, a climate-smart future for corn, soybean, livestock, and renewable natural gas production. I'm Brandon Butler, and this is Prairie Prophets. Our first stop is to meet Rick Myers, a 5th-generation farmer and excavation company owner who has restored native prairie plants to his lands. We'll ask Rick about why he went through this process and what the benefits to his property have been since bringing prairie back to his acreage.
I've lived here my whole life. 5 generations of my family has lived within a radius of about 20 miles here.
This is one of the most beautiful cabins I've ever been in. Can you tell us how this project came to be?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a labor of love. I've always kind of had the dream of doing this, and there's kind of a story behind almost everything in here. I was blessed with an absolute wonderful grandfather, and him and I were very close. But he was a carpenter, and as a young boy, I would help him. If I had any one wish for this cabin, I wish Grandpa could come back to sit in here and see the cabin that I built. But my family and I just love it out here. It's been a real blessing.
When you look out the windows, there's rolling hills of prairie, there's bird feeders, there's a beautiful pond that we've watched deer walk around in, fish jump in. You have a real affinity for wildlife, but you're a farmer. So how did those two blend together?
Well, as a farmer, you're surrounded by wildlife. Sitting in the combine, one of the joys of combining is watching the wildlife in front of you. We don't see as much of that in the combine today as what we did when I was growing up. So they had a CRP program, and I started enlisting some acres in the CRP program, and I've really enjoy the CRP, the native grasslands. I've come a great appreciation for. When you drive by in the wintertime, my native prairie grasses, if you drive by in January and it's snowy and it's cold, it's beautiful out there looking at it from the road, but it looks bleak and barren, like there is no life out there whatsoever. But go out there after a fresh snowfall, and when you walk through that prairie, it's just amazing the amount of life that's going on there. There's the pheasant tracks, there's the songbird tracks all over. There's little burrows and little mouse tracks where the field mice are going. Deer tracks everywhere. The coyotes have covered everything. It is a village out there that's going on that most people drive by and don't even realize it.
Talk about the Conservation Reserve Program, what it takes to be enrolled in that, what are the benefits of it, what are maybe some of the challenges?
Well, it's called the CRP program, which is Conservation Reserve Program. And essentially for most, there's so many different programs within that one program. But basically, most of them are a 10-year program. What the government does is they essentially rent your ground. They pay you an annual rental rate. And currently, depending on the soil types, different things, but we're right around that $300 an acre, $250 to $300. So they pay an annual rental rate for 10 years to put it in CRP. They will cost share some of the, usually it's 50%, but different programs have different cost sharing. They have wetlands programs, they have several programs.
Talk about your relationship to Brian and Lisa Sievers and the history of the Sievers family farm.
So Brian and I have known each other since the day we were born almost. We're cousins, number one, and we've been good friends. We're the same age. We grew up together, played together. We were the pitcher catcher combo in Little League. So we've had a lot of good times. It's been continues to be a wonderful relationship. And on his digester project, I did all the excavating for that, and that was a very interesting project. That was it was kind of the eye opener to me. I'd never heard of digesters before that, so it's been a fun ride.
How did the local agriculture community react to this new anaerobic digestion project coming into the county?
Overall, I think it's been very good. I know it brought economic growth to the community. They've employed a lot of people, me and my employees, and there's several others, the local co-ops, different things. So I think it's been an economical gain, and it's truly been for everybody. The whole digester and how you can create this has been fascinating for a lot of people, I believe.
As an outdoorsman, hearing Rick's story is an inspiration. To bridge the gap between conservation and agriculture, as he has, lends hope to a healthier future for all wildlife. Now let's head just down the gravel road to meet the Sievers.
He throws it so hard. Throws it so hard. Hut hut.
One of our first. Okay, do that one. Do that one.
Okay. Here you go. Look at this kid catch the ball. Third grader. We had a big game on Sunday too. So this house actually is where my dad was born. I was born and raised here. Grew up on this farm, and right where we're standing now was my football field that I used to pretend I was maybe a Chicago Bear or a Iowa State Cyclone. Went to college in 1977. That's where I met Lisa. Lisa's an Iowa native. I'm an Iowa native. Both of our families have been in Iowa for generations. It's just nice to know that we can raise our family and be involved in their lives as they grow up and move on. That's really the rewarding part of it, just being close to our family and in a community where you know a lot of people and have a lot of friends. Here comes the cheerleader.
Good job, sis.
Brian and Lisa Sievers have deep roots in Iowa agriculture, but recently they have pushed the boundaries of traditional practices. They were very early adopters in the field of manure to energy. What's the history of the Sievers family farm?
The specific farm where Lisa and I live now, that's been in our family about 110 years, I believe.
So your great-great-grandparents, great-grandparents, grandparents, father, you, your son, so you've got 6 generations of Sievers working this land in Scott County.
That's right, and actually there's 7th generation right behind that. They're experiencing the joys of being able to live in a rural Scott County, Iowa.
Clearly farming has changed significantly from when the Sievers family farm began in the 1850s till today, but it seems to be changing faster than ever now. And you're right on the forefront of that progressive movement towards diversifying your farm. What's given you that mindset, and what's driven you to experiment and do new things?
Well, actually, it goes back to the reverence that I have and our family, I think, has had for generations for the land that we farm. Those prairie soils that they first started farming back in the mid-1800s, when you look at the organic matter content of those soils, ran between 8.5% and 10%. And fast forward to 2022, those organic matter contents are half of that. And that's, to me, the challenge that we all face in agriculture is how can we stop that trend? Because we need to make sure that we figure out a way to ensure sustainability of the land that we use to produce our crops, And honestly, that's what's really driving me to this day, is that let's figure out a way to turn that trend around. And I think we found it with a combination of anaerobic digestion of our organic waste streams, and then also looking at ways to produce cover crops to add organic matter to those soils, whether they be winter hardy cover crops like cereal rye and winter wheat, or prairie cover crops. Either one will do exactly what we want to achieve, and that's to restore that organic matter content so that future generations can enjoy these resources just like we have.
I first met Brian Sievers through the American Biogas Council, where he sits on the board of directors. Brian is a champion of RNG production and serves as a spokesman for the industry. He's leading the Horizon 2 grant and is setting the stage for future expansion. I was eager to take a tour of his farm. So how many cattle do you have on this operation?
Well, we have two 1,200 head barns, so about 2,400 head of cattle are on feed. Generally, the buildings stay full at all times.
So their only job is to grow. So they eat and produce RNG feedstock.
That's right. That's right.
So the slats in this floor.
Mm-hmm.
So when the cattle are on top, the manure is passing through along with the bedding, and that's going into this trough.
Yeah. We refer to this as a scraper pit, and there's a manure scraper that's underneath this slatted floor, and the manure falls through the cracks down into the scraper pit, and then that scraper system moves the manure to the end of the building. And from there, we pump it over to our digester tanks, where it's processed in the production of renewable natural gas.
Your family was an early adopter to anaerobic digestion. Took a progressive turn in diversifying your operations. What was the initial perception of that, and how's it changed over the years?
It was a very early idea, probably 5 to 8 years ahead of its time, really, for this area. But as we built it and we saw the synergy starting to develop, you could see, okay, this is going to have some momentum. If we can get the right pieces in place, if we can find a place to source inputs to the digester, and then a place to go with our outputs. And so I think on the list of crazy things that my dad has proposed, it's really not necessarily at the top.
From his son's perspective, Brian has always been driven to try progressive processes in agriculture. That's just how he's built. Not afraid to push the envelope and to be on the fringe of emerging technologies. What's the process been like as far as permitting and getting your anaerobic digesters operating and getting government support in this area?
Well, the process that you have to go through requires the local government, or in this case, the Scott County Board of Supervisors, to have an opportunity to look at the plan that we've submitted to the DNR, to review it, to have a public hearing, and then essentially to say, yes, we approve of this plan. And so that's the process we had to go through here locally when we met with the Scott County Board of Supervisors last early spring in the permit process. And we were tickled to have full or unanimous support of the 5-member Scott County Board of Supervisors when we approached them about the plan that we had in place to expand the digester facility, to start producing renewable natural gas, and integrate that production through our digesters through the beef cattle feedlot as well as the biomass. But we also have always had in Scott County just outstanding rural agricultural leadership. One of those examples is John Maxwell, who's one of our Board of Supervisors members. And John has a dairy in northern Scott County, a very modern, progressive dairy. And so when we presented to the Board of Supervisors and John, why he knew and understood exactly what it was we were trying to achieve with regard to processing livestock manure, integrating biomass from our cover crops and prairie, because he's also been a very strong advocate for conservation practices and ensuring that we're doing things right when it comes to the environment and the ecological services we can provide.
Brian has provided a lot of practical insight on how Iowa farmers are embracing innovation and technology to advance their operations. One such farmer is Scott County Supervisor John Maxwell. I visit his farm to gain perspective on a modern dairy. At Cinnamon Ridge Farm, John Maxwell explains how agriculture has changed so much, even robots have come to be part of daily activities. John is a believer in technology and played a role in Sievers digesters being established in Scott County.
With the robots, the cow comes in. The robot remembers and records every drop of milk that that cow will give for its lifetime. It comes into the robot. Behind its left ear is a box that identifies her, and the robot will then know how much feed to give them. What attracting her in is getting feed. The amount of milk she gave yesterday determines how much milk she gets today. So it's performance-based. The more you milk, the more feed you get.
Yeah, the amazing thing I was watching was how the suction finds the teats, like a little laser.
And then there's a laser that comes out and it sees the teats, and it's out. Well, in analytic geometry in high school, you had an XYZ axis, same thing. It finds it and then puts the teacup on. It'll put on full on, it senses the flow. When the flow stops,
So the old job.
Yep.
It's in the past.
Does the old, yep. It went out with the buggy whip.
So your story is similar to Brian Sievers in the sense that you're both fifth-generation farmers. Your family showed up in Scott County in the 1850s. What also is interesting is that you're both really progressive in your methods of farming today. How is technology and new innovation driving some of your practice?
Technology is huge. I mean, we milk with robots as an example. There's robotics all over here. There's all sorts of things that are part of getting better, bigger, and also being able to survive today in the environment that we have.
What do you see the future of farming look like, and what advice would you give to that next generation of farmers?
The advice I would give the next generation is be always willing to explore the possibilities that you have. I've got a daughter that's kind of some of the cows and going on in the background. She is the next generation. And she was the one that was interested in robots, and she's the one. So explore those possibilities, and also of alternate sources of how can I take that manure and make it into something, and make it into a profit, and make it into a profit for my facility and my farm.
I was blown away to learn about all the technology being used at Cinnamon Ridge. I had no idea robots were milking cows these days. With a new perspective on how advanced neighboring operations are, I'm heading back to Sievers to learn more about his anaerobic digestion process. What is this that we're looking at?
This is wet corn gluten. So this comes from an ethanol plant, nearby ethanol plant, an ADM facility in Clinton, Iowa. And for the ethanol industry, this is their waste product, or one of their waste products. Well, to them, it's a waste product. To us, it's a feedstock for our cattle.
They take corn in, extract what they need. This is left over.
Right.
And then you can feed it to your
This
cattle.
has got the protein in it, and so we eliminate the use of soybean meal as a protein source for our cattle. Plus, it has still some corn in it, some ground up corn, so there's very high level of digestibility for the cattle. They love it. It tastes great, smells great. It's very palatable for the cattle. So again, they're waste stream because of another feed substrate for us.
The corn is grown, the corn's harvested, it goes off to an ethanol plant, is made into a renewable energy there. This waste product comes back to you, is fed to the cows, that manure goes into the digester, another renewable energy is made there. The stover goes into bedding. Like, this whole thing's pretty cyclical.
Absolutely. That's the whole point of the model, is to create a circular production system where you're utilizing waste streams from one segment of that system as a feedstock for the next leg.
Pretty incredible. Roeslein just received a Climate Smart Commodities grant for a substantial amount of money. And your farm is essentially going to be the origin of what we're calling Horizon 2. Can you explain Horizon 2?
Well, Horizon 2 is devoted to finding that level of participation that we think is necessary to integrate biomass as a resource for our anaerobic digesters. So economically, what's it going to take for producers to say, you know, I think I'm interested in growing some cover crops or planting some prairie that can become a feedstock for a digester facility. And so we hope that through that grant opportunity, we're going to learn a lot. And at the end of the 5-year grant period, I think we're going to be so much further ahead as a result of this opportunity.
Well, we saw where the manure originates from. Now it's scraped to this large pit here. Where does it go from there?
From there, we pump that manure over to a building behind us, and that's where we mix it with other co-feeds. For example, the biomass that we're going to be harvesting and using as an energy source for our digesters will get mixed with the manure in a 90,000-gallon pit inside that reception pit building. From there, it'll be pumped into our anaerobic digester. Now, the material as it comes out of those digesters after its 25 to 40-day retention time gets pumped to a building just to your right, and that's where we separate the liquid and solid fractions. The liquid we actually pump to a lagoon, and that's used as fertilizer for our cropland, for actually over 3,000 acres of cropland.
And the gases will be pumped right over to a purification site. We've built a pipeline, and the RNG will go into the national grid.
That's right.
30 years from now, what does a typical day look like on the Sievers family farm?
Oh man, I wish I could predict that, Brandon, I really do. You know, 30 years from now, I would hope that we're still producing food, feed, fuel, and fiber for those of us around who live in our community as well as around the U.S. or possibly world. I was at the Farm Progress Show here several weeks ago in central Iowa, and the alleyway that we walked down, on the one side they had the driverless tractor. I made the comment that day to my grandsons, I says, I can't think of an industry where you can take your science and technology, engineering, math skills, the core STEM courses, and apply those any better than you can right in agriculture, than any other industry in the world. And so that's what really gives me a lot of excitement. Those are what they call button weeds.
Baby, where are you? Oh, you're behind me.
When your great-great-grandfathers settled here, this is basically what was here. There was no corn, no soybeans, no crops. That's about your size too, that's a little one.
Me too.
Should we count the petals?
Yeah. How about we go like that?
The Sievers are investors in land, in farming, in family, and in the future. They have embraced technology and integrated it throughout their operations. Now it's paying off, and their neighbors are taking notice. It takes people like the Sievers, those crazy early adopters, to make change happen. Brian and Lisa are setting the bar and preparing their family and friends for a new future in agriculture.